Hello, everybody, and welcome again back to Procrastinator's Pit Stop. We have with us here today Paul Malott. Paul is a doctoral candidate, an expert in AI-driven business transformation, dedicated to democratizing data and AI for small businesses. With over 14 years in supply chain management, procurement, and AI implementation, he helps small and medium-sized businesses leverage open-source AI tools to automate processes, reduce costs, and make data-driven decisions, leveling the playing field with larger firms. Paul, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Chris. I couldn't have said that better myself. I mean, I probably should have wrote that on the back of my book somewhere to highlight everything and the skills that I've applied to the book. I appreciate you having me. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you for being on the show today, Paul. Now, before we dive into it, we do like to have an icebreaker on the show. And your question today is, which cartoon character do you resonate with the most and why?
Chris, you're killing me, man. No, I wrote a comic book myself, and I wrote that comic book in an interesting time in my life where I was probably confused and also seeking resolution in a lot of different things, family life and corporate life. So the main character of that book, Spish Sullivan, came out. But I'd like to, I guess, take a moment and maybe reflect more on a more high profile character. I feel more like Superman, right, on a daily basis with a family of five, three cats too. I have a 9-year-old son, right, a 4-year-old daughter, and a 3.5-year-old daughter. And as you can imagine, sometimes I'm Clark Kent on the phone calls and trying to keep my hair from getting all screwed up. But when I'm Superman running around carrying one baby and trying to make, I don't know, a peanut butter and jelly sandwich for the other, and then it's like you're living in Las Vegas. Too bad there's not a Vegas superhero that I'm aware of, but just the sensory overload all the time with all the children. So Superman's my answer.
Okay. No, I like it. I love that one. Definitely love it. Big, strong, very strong character. I love that one. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey, Paul, and how you got to be where you are today?
Sure, sure. So, well, as I mentioned, I'm one of many things, right? I'm a father, a husband. My career's been in procurement. I have a master's degree in project management from Ferris State, and I'm currently studying at the U of M Flint, in particular AI and its impact on small businesses. And the path leading up to this has been really cool. My dad has been an entrepreneur without the business skills, and Dad, I'm sorry when you watch this, but he's a really driven guy, and he's a hobbyist, right? Interested in a lot of different things, and because of that, that wore off on me, right? So I've always had a broad interest, and luckily it complements a generally broad skill set, right? And so things like car racing or rally racing I've done, and hockey playing, and all to a very high level because being pushed to do so, right? Being a driven person naturally. So that all culminated in a career where my voice could be heard in procurement, right? The negotiation aspect of it. And I was fortunate to have good mentors in the career that pushed me to other heights. And then I found myself 6 months ago being recalibrated out of a corporate environment, which is a fancy way to say you're getting shit canned, man, which is totally fine, right? One door closes and 500 doors open. So what I did is I took one of those interests, which was AI, right? And it's been an interest for a long time since, since it became a buzzword 5 years ago or with GPT, the first GPT. And, I've been helping friends and family use it, right? And I'm pretty good at it, good enough to implement it at a corporate level. So I said, why not give it a chance and do it yourself? So I wrote the book, I changed my studies, and here I am.
Well, that's certainly quite a journey you've been on. Thank you for sharing.
Mhm.
Now, every journey has its own, fair share of, challenges and things that you need to overcome. What do you think was the biggest challenge that you had to overcome?
For me, the hobbies, right? And having the breadth of hobbies, right? And maybe not the depth of them. Uh, it feeds into, in a bad way, the type of ADHD personality I have, right? And so focus was always, being able to focus on and develop my skill set further has always been a challenge. And it's something today I still battle with every day. It's something like keeping track of time. It's something, just the simple small things that can get in the way, right? And so it's all about trying to be as productive with the right kind of content today.
I like that. And actually, speaking about the focus aspect of it, you wrote a comic book and you wrote a book. So I have a couple of different questions revolving around that. But they do say that writing a book is about 98% procrastination and about 2% actually doing it. So how
Yeah,
true is that for you?
100% true. I mean, there's like these. It's the same with how I study too. And thankfully my family forgives me for the turd that comes out when I'm studying and I'm in the moment. But you have these like moments of brilliance, and I'm sure athletes relate to it better than I can when they get in the zone, right? But for me, there's like a mental state where few and far between, I hate to say, right? That you get into and that's where your productive time comes, right? Your productivity comes from that mental state, and honestly, like I said, it's few and far between. So you're spending 99% of the time kind of thinking about these things, with both book and comic book. You're thinking about how you want it to come out. You're changing it because nothing's perfect. I'm an ADHD guy and a perfectionist, so I have two things working against me hardcore in that aspect, right? And honestly, the best thing to do is to roll with it. Like I said, my family is so forgiving in the fact that they know when I'm in the zone, I'm going to be like, just kind of an ignorant guy to everything else around me. And I know that's not right. I know it's rude. I know I'm probably rude, but I'm absolutely getting something done in the right aspect there. And it requires, a lot of understanding about yourself and for other people to understand you too. But long answer, but absolutely. I mean, I'm most productive 1 minute out of the day.
Well, when it comes to the book and the comic book, I'm curious, and I'm sure our listeners are curious too. Which one did you enjoy creating more?
And the comic book I really enjoyed because it had me. It's a comedy. It's a dark comedy, and it's called The Bucket of Blood, and it's about two guys that live in Detroit in a dystopian future where things are just totally messed up, and the world is Detroit, as far as we know, is ran by Granny Smith, right? And Granny Smith is a totalitarian, rude, rude old lady, and yeah, I just had a lot of fun with myself writing it, right? So, and it was about the creative side of things more than the professional side. And on the home front, while I was writing it, I was overcoming some personal challenges with addiction, right? And overcoming some challenges with new career opportunities that had opened up. And, that allowed me to kind of separate those spaces, the career challenges, the focus on the addiction and the everything, right? It opened it up to where I could kind of make light of the whole situation.
Very true. Sometimes we tend to take things a little too seriously, and the joke there is that you shouldn't take it too seriously because nobody gets out alive.
Truth, right?
But no. And so what does procrastination mean to you personally, and how would you define it?
Procrastination to me, as a definition, is purposefully putting on the back burner something that you should be doing, something that you can do, with generally minimal effort, and probably something that must be done, right? I mean that should be done, but must be done. And when you're purposefully delaying that, that's procrastination 101, right?
And what's your secret sauce for overcoming procrastination?
Well, I think I think you probably can predict the answer here with the introduction there and several AIs, but it's AI. I try as much as possible to lean on these systems that can do a lot of menial thinking for me, right? Calculations and things I may not be good at. So I'm constantly in a moment I want to go away, right? And I'm tired of doing something. I'll try to ask a GPT or the 500 other different AI tools available to do something for me. And it's not about creating content, but it's about getting done what I know I need to get done, right? I'm not just asking it to go ahead and make a video because I know AI can do that, right? Which I think, now people are just doing on purpose, just make content to make content. It's about asking it to do something I know I have to do, right? So, prime example is the research that I have to do for school. You know, I find the research part of it the most interesting because I have more fun resolving the issue of getting the research on my table faster than I do actually reading the documents. You know what I mean? So for me, I'm making fun out of the digging and detective experience, and then leaving the AI to do the correlation. And I come back to it and I go, okay, well, I use my logic then. Okay, it did a terrible job, or it did perfect, and I want to explore certain topics, or I think it can go this way. It helps a lot with connecting the dots, and especially if you can imagine with a brain that is constantly firing on these different cylinders, AI can kind of help bring it all into scope for me.
No, that makes a lot of sense. It actually brings me to a pretty interesting question when it comes to AI. When you're using it to summarize meetings or summarize notes, we know that AI doesn't have a bias. But do you think that we might be losing some context if we just get the cliff notes, so to speak? I suppose you could make the same argument for cliff notes, or back in the day, Pink Monkey that used to take all the core ideas of a book and just put them in point form.
Yep. Yeah.
Do you think there's any possibility for losing something that's important there by doing
No,
that?
I think that's a fantastic question. I mean, believe me, the thought occurs to me all the time. What happened? What if 10 years from now everything is generated by AI, right? You got no context from any kind of human anything, right? But one of the main points of all the executives that are putting out OpenAI and Claude and Anthropic and all these bigger systems that are pushing things through, one of their big initiatives is to make sure we have a human in the loop, right? And that means a lot of different things, but it really means we are trying to make sure that we're there when we develop these things to add the context and to remove the bias. And we have to shape the way we understand this, that the AI is not going to do it for us, but it's going to get us close, and we have to bring it over the line, right? And so, when I go back to the research example, when I'm researching something and I get an answer, I'm fully aware that AI can tell me something very confidently, right? And make it true, right? Or make it seem true. And, it's up to me to remove that bias, right? And if I want to put a quality paper to any scholarly journal, I'm going to be editing the hell out of that document and rewriting the AI a little bit backwards, right? But that's where I think we're going to be in the future, is being better at prompting and being involved with AI. So we're adding the context, giving it, the ability to contextualize what we're doing, and hopefully that's the future. If not, we might be in trouble, because, I use for notes, for example, I really liked your Cliff Note example, because I use a Fathom note taker for my meetings, and what it does, I mean, it summarizes things better than I could ever summarize in a notepad, and it summarizes it for free. And that's all fine and dandy, right? I notice it tells me that I'm committing on things that I absolutely wouldn't commit on. There's things that you're watching out for. So I'm not sending it blindly to the people who were in the meeting, assuming, there's going to be mistakes. But there's also an interesting thing that it does, and it sends a video too. And I find the video better than the notes because I can assess myself, look at my behavior, really understand what was going on, read the room, if you have the time, right? But that's where you're adding that layer of protection against that kind of bias.
No, you mentioned these different these different mistakes where AI maybe says you're committing to something that you wouldn't commit to. I've been trying to catch it out myself, just in different research things. I haven't seen one yet. What would you say is in your experience, in your travels, what would you say is the biggest sort of blunder AI has made in answering a question?
Wow. Well, I mean, if you're asking for facts, right? I mean, you absolutely need to double check your facts, and it's not about how AI is answering it. It's more about how you're prompting the AI, right? And so in your prompts, the specificity that you give could also lead to a very specific answer that's just absolute garbage. Okay. And using the research as an example, I can give if I provided a site, Paul Malott or Chris Abdi, and wrote this awesome thing about AI in the future, it would cite us as the writers of that moving forward. right? It would take what we told it to be true and, and use it as I requested it to use it, So it's not about blindly using these tools. Yeah, I'm sorry if I made it seem like that, right? Using these tools to just progress content. It's about using them with, thoughtful intention too, right?
And for anybody out there who's listening who has a small business and they're maybe looking to get into AI, maybe just to get their feet wet, what would you suggest is one of the most useful tools and maybe isn't as intimidating as some of the other ones?
Well, another great question, Chris. Thanks. Obviously the belle of the ball here is our chat GPTs, right? And they're great because, well, you type it in, right? You speak your typical language to the GPT and it turns something out, but there are things like Perplexity and Claude, right? Operate in a very similar manner. They're the language learning models, and you can prompt it, but it gives you your information in a different way. So Perplexity, for example, I like in particular because of the bias problem. Perplexity is very good at finding the source, right? And it will give you the source of data and give you correlation to that source. So it'll also provide, additional layers of information so you can validate what it's saying, right? And so what I find myself doing, honestly, is using a combination of a GPT and its response with a Perplexity. And, these are things you could perplexity.ai, right? You just go on and you can start using it. But I find myself using a combination of both to get a really robust answer. And generally in anything you're looking for, right? Now, I know some people will like go to a GPT instead of Google. I don't do that. I don't recommend it, because it's about prompting it with something that's going to give you, again, valuable insight, right? And push your level of discovery a little bit further than what you'd use it for generally. So if I'm a small business guy, I'm turning to either one of those things for, again, the menial tasks, right? I have receipts, for example, from the last month, and I want to find out how many are under $10, but I don't want to sit there and spend the time going through my Excel file. Well, I'm going to ask GPT to do it for me. And that stuff is accurate. That stuff is going to come out 99.999% of the time perfect, because you're asking it to deal with ones and zeros, right? Not necessarily a complex contextual situation.
And another thing here, because what we're talking about here, and as you've said it, we want to make sure that we have that human in between the AI and the business as well. Do you think that there's an effect on? You mentioned you can get more done, but do you think that there's going to be some sort of effect potentially where we could, even potentially procrastinate more because we know that AI is going to step in?
100%. Actually, that's the motivation for being on this on your show is exactly that. I mean, there's things we need to be aware of as people, right? As a society, and we can do more with it. We can calculate these menial tasks. We can upskill ourselves to prompt these GPTs better. We can build GPTs into anything that's digital now, but do we want to just do more of that? I don't think that's the answer, right? I think, and that's a really, the question leads to a foundational issue with business leaders. Everybody has this halo where they are the business, especially with small businesses. And when I'm working with these founders and owners, one of the things that I find is that, they have a very hard time of removing themselves from the day to day because they're really damn good at doing that, right? And you give them a GPT tool or you give them a custom tool and they want to use it to 150% of its max, And what you got, and what I find is that, it's a part of it is the consulting and letting them know it's okay to let it do it to its current capacity, which was your capacity, because guess what? You're going to be able to retire sooner. That, your goals are not to work more and create more content unless you're trying to do something different sooner. Your goal is to alleviate yourself from some of these problems, especially with using AI. So, you could take it and you could go capitalism 100%, right? And produce, or you can take it and you can draw a line and you can say, hey, look, we are getting a better standard of living because we're using these tools better. And that's one of the things I'm actually researching is, the impact of robotic process automation. So if you have a small company, for example, a bank, and they have an Excel file that just needs a couple things calculated in the background to go into a different file or become a customer ticket or something, these things in the background are doing it. And what are we doing? We're asking these things to do more of it. And we're just, because they're doing it so well, we keep going back and saying, well, increase your capacity, do it more, do it harder, do it faster. But some of the problem that businesses have is like, well, what's the fine line, right? When have you optimized enough? So, I mean, that question's a fantastic question. I personally think that we should be taking every moment to be happy, right? And if that means, twiddling your thumbs and enjoying yourself, do it, right? And using AI to do things like calculate what 10 plus 10 is, please be my guest because I'm doing that.
No, I like that. I like that. Now, we all know that AI is kind of tutored to, take all your mundane, boring, repetitive tasks and sort of automate them. But I'm curious, what's the most interesting use of AI that maybe you've seen in a small business?
Geez, in a small business, really interesting. I worked with a coffee shop, believe it or not, that would use this application. It's an open source AI application. And what that means is that you can basically utilize it for free, right? The source code is available. You can pull it and put it in your system and then do what you want with it. And this application basically reads the right as the person walks in the door and begins preparing coffee, right? And I just think it's the coolest thing I've ever seen. There are problems with it in terms of, what if that person doesn't want that particular coffee that they've selected as their favorite? You know what I mean? But and those are resolved in simple ways. But that's just a super cool way to and you know what it did? It increased the throughput of this store fantastically, like 30% or something like that. And it's just a small thing that it's a convenience factor, right? But super cool. I've seen the same concept used, and it's a really terrible example. Luckily, everything turned out well, but I have a friend down here who has a pool in their backyard, and they use the same face hugger application to recognize what is near the pool, right? Is it an animal? Is it, two-legged or four-legged, basically? And if it was two-legged, an alarm would go off, right? And send a text to the individual that, hey, probably your child is out around the pool and you don't want them, right? So another example of the same kind of technology just being used for a really cool preventative purpose too.
Yeah, I like those examples. I'm actually curious now myself to see how that would measure your. I'm guessing they just took the data sets in that coffee shop of who walked through the door and then who ordered what coffee, maybe. But
Yep, it was based on profile basically. So you have a beautiful profile picture, you have, the data of your name and you signed up for you're a subscriber to whatever, and you have your list of your favorite coffees. And you basically opt into, yeah, I want my coffee to start right away, or my Americano to begin as soon as I walk in the door. I'm opted into it, boom. The problem comes if you've opted into that and then you just decide you hate Americanos one day, right? Then you're going to walk in and you're going to end up having to change it or flag somebody or, be progressive. But in terms of, updating your application.
no, I like that. I'm curious. We've talked about some of the interesting uses of AI. I mean, have you ever seen a Rube Goldberg type AI that just, was overly complex and really just didn't do anything?
Well, I mean, I'm making those things all the time. Talk about doing things to not producing content that's invaluable, right? I'm constantly in the background. There's an interesting AI out there right now that will build a web application for you. It's called a Replit, Replit. And it's a language learning model that takes your prompt, just like a GPT, but it turns it into code. And it codes in Python and just all Node and everything, right? And I find myself making absolutely useless applications nonstop. And, an example is Pet Pal Connect. I had this idea that I would put my animals in their own little social media and then let AI go crazy, right? Describe my animals, Have AI, analyze the behavior based on a picture, analyze their mood, and so on. And then basically every day that I would put a picture on there, it would post out as if it was my cat Bella, right? The Queen Bella and blah blah blah. But I mean, that's absolutely pointless, right? I mean, not necessarily crazy like a Rube Goldberg machine, but definitely something interesting that does pretty much nothing. Mostly for my own social experiment, I guess.
Actually, you may say that it's interesting you mentioned that one actually because there actually is a firm right now. I think they're in the media. They're actually finding a way to communicate with animals that way. So they're actually taking AI and they're just recording everything that animals do to interact with each other, and they're trying to figure out. They're doing it with dogs and they're doing it with cats. They're training the dogs and the cats to use those little buttons,
Yes,
and
I've seen that.
but now they're saying that if they can put like microphones in the collar and they can interpret subtle sounds, and they can maybe have that attached to food. So I mean, having them post to
Yes,
social media, I mean that's one thing, but I mean that idea is definitely not useless because there's actually a lot of
sure.
companies working on that.
Sure. I mean, so the software space, the software as a service space, there's so much out there that I'm sure, we don't know about that's progressing society so well. It's crazy. I end up doing these things that are just making these applications using Replit that I think have some kind of value or interest. It's my new way of expressing a hobby, right? So another example is like take a DNA string. Same thing. I got the inspiration from how scientists are using. They've taken DNA and they've turned it into musical notes. And there's something about it. I don't know the science behind it, right? But I thought, oh, what a great idea. They're using it to measure something that's of value. I know that, right? But far beyond what my idea is. But my thought is take the DNA string and create a custom song. What does AI think my 70% rock DNA and 30%, R&B DNA sounds like? I have no idea, but that's a really good example probably of something useless.
Well, if it's understanding the human condition, I mean, everything that might seem useless is actually a useful data
Sure.
point too. And I'm
Sure.
sure that while you're making those useless machines, it's funneling off some data somewhere to sell
You
off
know
the
it,
idea
man.
somewhere.
You know it. You know it.
And when you start looking at AI and trying to just get everything ready again, do you um, at what point do you try to automate something instead of just doing it manually? Like I'm sure there's instances of that where something's going to happen, you're trying to automate something, but it's just taking so much time, it's just better to do the thing.
Sure, sure. When I hit that roadblock, I know through experience that it's better to just power through it and automate it. Honestly, so I rarely hit a point, at least with my own personal business, where if it can be automated, I do. I automate it. I rarely hit a point where I go, well, I'll just spend the extra 10 minutes to do it. And that's because I know that if it's automated to a good enough quality, I'm going to have time. I'm going to get that time back to do what is really driving the ROI, right? And I do better in my business having conversations with people. I do better in my business, having meetings and shaking hands and doing the things I never thought I'd like to do, but I really enjoy doing it, right? And it inspires me. So what I find is that there's 60% of business owners are spending, 4 hours plus on the phone, cold calling and, handling these things that AI could probably do for you. Right. And so my answer is not never. Do I never just hit a roadblock and go, okay, well, I'll just do it myself. The general rule of thumb that I apply is if it is data, right? If it involves data, there's a high likelihood I can automate it, right? And that may be the first communication in an email, right? It may be the first and second communication in an email, depending on the context of the emails, right? If I'm trying to warm you up to my business, right? It'll be the first and second, and the third email will be from me. I'm assuming you haven't responded, but as soon as somebody responds, they're going to get me, right? And there's no use. The flip side of it is I spend the time, texting that person, providing the email, going through the list, and it takes an hour to send one email. And no joke, that the process of lead generation and all that, it takes a long time. So that's just one example, right? There's plenty out there where you can automate it if it's static. There's also things though. I'm sitting here thinking out loud. I have a smart Samsung refrigerator that I could ask it to do more for me, but I'm not. You know what I mean? That's something. And I don't have an answer for why I haven't asked it to reorder my groceries, for example, right? Because it's fantastic. It has the computer, the TV the camera that looks inside the fridge and tells you when you're missing something, right? If it's used to seeing milk or something, right? It'll say, hey, you don't have any milk. Should I reorder it for you? Well, generally, I'm not. I'm like, no. One, I know that my wife can probably buy it for cheaper. You know, that's probably a reason. But two, I don't want to mess with that right now. And that's just pure laziness, probably.
Well, I don't know. I think that that's just more of like a personal choice too, because one of the things that, and this happens with just standard ordering apps too, like, Instacart or
Hmm.
similar, is that if you order a specific brand of milk and they don't have it, they'll just replace it and send something else with you, or they'll refund it. And that's, to me, I mean, if it's successful, it saves you time.
Hmm.
But I mean, if it brings you a product and you absolutely don't like it at all, then is it just better to just not have the
Yep.
product?
Yeah. No. And that's perfect example of that, right? Like, how much time is a bad automation wasting too, right? So it really goes back to the doing things with the right intent, using AI with the right intent to make the content that is productive, right? And not just using it to use it.
And we all know AI is, it's getting better, at a breakneck pace right now. Most of the AI advancements we've actually done to today actually only happened in like the last 2 years.
Hmm.
So it's interesting. So where would you see your business and yourself within the next year? I mean, we can't even say 5 or 6 because it's too long.
No, I know, and that's a great question. I think anything digital right now needs agility, right? And it sounds cliche, but it means, a digital organization, mine and an organization that's using digital assets daily. I need to be prepared for something to change at a moment's notice. And the way I try to do that today is to incorporate AI into even the smallest mundane, automations you can do. So for those that don't know, a general automation you can think of, a good example of an automation is when you're using your Google to sign on to a certain website. It'll say, you click onto the website and it says, would you like to authorize this with Google? Yes, blah, blah, blah. And you go through. Well, automations in the background are basically that. They're just using different calls and API to connect different websites and so on. And the smarter you're at it, right? And more clever you are, the more you can get done with it. So, using the automation as an example, I'm trying to overcomplicate it, honestly, by taking AI and inserting it into certain processes. And when you do that, what I'm hoping for is that I can accommodate for the future revelations that come from those particular type of AI. So if I'm building something that is, I'll use Perplexity because it's a good research assistant. If I'm building something that's research based, I'm likely going to insert Perplexity in there so that I can kind of protect for that future, hedge for the future changes that are going to come. Because those, they're updated and they're pushed onto whatever you're using. It's not like I'm going to fall behind and have to redo everything, or someone from my team is going to have to redo everything because an update's happened, which is typical for just almost any software, right? But you kind of hedge for that.
Okay, that makes sense. That definitely makes sense. Thanks for sharing that. So we are coming up close to the time here. It's been a great conversation, Paul. Was there
Absolutely.
anything that you felt maybe I should have asked but I didn't ask, or anything that we should have covered that maybe we didn't cover today?
No, Chris, you nailed it, man. And I appreciate well, I expected a couple questions about procrastination, but I appreciate the tougher questions here, man. I was, uh, Um,
All right. Well, thank you once again for joining the show. Just in case somebody wants to reach out, our listeners, they have questions, maybe they want to learn about AI, learn more about your business. How can they contact you? What's the best way?
Great question. So please you send me an email, right? Or we'll check out my website, www.pmco.odoo.com, and or send me an email, malott @umich.edu, umich.edu. And I'll be more than happy to answer any questions or guide somebody through their use of certain AIs, or point them to potential tools, right? That could be of use to them, right, in their particular situation. That's kind of where I've niched myself out in terms of the value that I can provide to people is just having a very good understanding of what's available, what's out there, and their uses, and of course how they integrate with everything else.
All right. Well, thank you for that. And to our listeners, don't worry. We will be putting that in the show notes. So you'll be able to find it. You don't have to worry about grabbing a pen right now. And just once again, Paul, thank you for joining us on the show. And to all our listeners, thank you once again for tuning in. And just remember, if you can't find that inspiration or motivation for yourself today, maybe just go out and be that inspiration or motivation for someone else. And we'll see you again next time.